Okay, guys, so in this video we're going to have a look at Adonis, I think, right? So basically, I'm just gonna have a sit down here with you and install Adonis and just kind of go through this. As you can see, I'm here on well, their homepage with their documentation. Just ran the initialization script, or I'm downloading their CLI basically. And now let's have a look here. Yep, so the help section, and basically the command is Adonis new and then something something whatever you want in order to actually initialize that project. So for me this is like completely fresh. I haven't used Adonis before, but I had a request for making this video, so I figured, all right, let's try it. So Adonis serve dash dash dev, and there we are. Everything is up and running, which is so nice. It was fairly quick to set these sorts of things up, but then again, these convenience frameworks are usually meant to do that exact thing. And now comes the fun part, reading through all of the generated unknown files and learning yet another framework and how they do things in that framework. It's usually very easy to just run the commands, but to figure out if this is going to work long term or not is, well, it's kind of tricky. So for me, there's a lot of reading in this when I was doing this, basically, because I like all of this stuff that you see here. This is Adonis specific, like it's all within the framework. So for me, who's been doing development with JavaScript and so forth for a little while now, it's it's I have to relearn everything. Well, not everything, but I have to figure out how this framework does everything. So basically, you can see all of these setup files. You have an environmental file where you provide different variables, and then they have this app file where basically here you include all of the different, because it's very pluggable. Like you can include different providers and different, well, the best way to call it is plugins. I would say it's different uh, modules within the framework that you can hook on if you don't want everything. In my installation, I'm using absolutely everything. Like all I think so, at least it's the full stack installation that holds all of the things. And then you have your routes file, where we're going to come back to that in a moment. I'm basically just reading through all the things now. And they use Edge for rendering, which is new to me. I haven't used that before. Style CSS, I don't know if there's a CSS compiler included in this framework, because like the goal of this video here is just to do the bare bone basics. I just want to get my bearings and figure out, okay, how do I make a standard CRUD application API type of thing with the database and some stuff, right? And that's kind of it, really. So I'm basically just reading through all of the different configurations. It's well, they say that this is a convention over configuration type of deal, if I remember correctly. Well, I suppose that I sort of agree with that. Honestly, this all of this stuff that I kind of read through here felt really it felt very similar to PHP, and like how something like Laravel sets up all the code for you. That was my first thinking when I was doing this. This is like kind of like generating a Laravel project. And here we have some file transport for the different logs and so forth. I wasn't really so impressed by the logging, if I remember correctly now, because like one of the things, like it's really bare bones to have just logs go to standard out and to have to go to the file system, because most serious systems, they don't have, well, not most, but quite a lot of serious systems don't really just use files and standard out for their logging. They actually dispatch their logs to a third party somewhere. You can, of course, get around that, but still, it was just a small thing that I was like, I would have wanted that to be a little bit more extensive. And yes, and then we're going through the body parser, where we can basically configure how the incoming network requests are going to be formatted. This I thought was absolutely amazing, that it kind of just out of the box supports form data and well, multiple like file uploads basically, and that you could actually dictate how big your files should be, because I always found that to be a bit of a hassle. Course or this is kind of weird. honestly, access control request headers and things like that. It felt like I don't know why you as a framework would feel the need to add this in as a thing, because like not there's not that many applications that have a need for a specific configuration setup for this. And here is our database configuration: SQLite, MySQL, Postgres. Like all of this is basically Adonis seems to favor relational databases. There is support for Redis as well, but mostly for I think it's only for session management. So it's a very opinionated framework, I will say that. But opinionated doesn't mean bad, because opinionated can be really great if you really know that the opinions of the person who's building this framework actually aligns with what you need. And as you can see here, you have different validation systems. You have sessions, they support JVTs and basic authentication. Not that many people are using basic these days, but it's there if you want it. So shield, this is basically just for different, like it's the sanity, like this is, most of this you would get with Helmet if you were using something like Express, but I think it's very nice that you can actually go this granularly and kind of configure it as you want. I had some issues with this cross-site request forgery or CSRF token of this configuration or later, but I kind of figured it out, and honestly, it was kind of nice. Like I was a little bit annoyed first because I felt that it was getting in my way, but then I remembered this configuration, and then it kind of became fairly natural to just go there and just do the updates. Me and my reading skills could use some work. One thing that I thought was a little bit off-putting as well was that this use function here, but I kind of get it, because if this framework is going to be about configuration, or sorry, convention over configuration, then you can create like just a function that, because use is basically just importing things. It's the require, it's the framework's own require thing, and when you are actually putting things in the right place, then it will go to the right directory. So here I'm just declaring a route. That's just, first thing I always do when I'm trying out something new. So this I was not a fan of. I was not a fan of the controller, the way that they are doing controllers. So here you can see that I kind of figured out that, okay, the controller needs to go into controller/HTTP, because this is the convention over configuration, that like you just need to know which directory. If you read the documentation and you put things in the right folder or things like that, you don't have to configure it, you just have to know, which is, to me, it's such a weird thing. I get it, but at the same time it can get a little bit weird, because if you're using convention over configuration, that's just configuration, but you're just doing it through convention. It's the same thing. It's instead of forcing someone to configure something, you're forcing them to read your documentation to know where to put something, and that's just a configuration. It's an opinionated configuration. You could have just created a configuration where there's a reasonable default, and then let people kind of be flexible and pick whatever they want. So what they pretty much do there, as we saw, is that they're like, if you want to declare a route as a controller, what you're actually doing is that you're giving the route handler, you're giving it the path, but you're also giving it a string representation of the name of your controller class and the method that you're going to invoke on that controller, and that is horrible. It's absolutely horrible if you ask me. So this means that you're kind of just not like, I don't even know if Adonis, I mean, it is a JavaScript oriented framework, so I'm not sure what the support for TypeScript is in all of this. I mean, there should be TypeScript support, but like, just look at that. It's like, why would I want to give you a string that represents the controller that I want to use? Why not give you the controller directly, import it as a real file, actually have it as a real reference, and pass in the actual reference? That's what I want. I don't want to give you a string that just, I kind of lose the type safety, or well, not type safety, but I lose the reference. There's no connection point. So if I name that thing the wrong thing, it can become a bit of a hassle for me to figure out, okay, which controller is mapping to this thing here. And this thing here I also thought was really weird. So I can declare a resource, which is called user controller in this case, and it's the same thing as declaring all of those endpoints. And I kind of go, well, that's great. It's just that I still need to know. Okay, sure, it's if I know this framework by heart, it's going to save me the time of declaring those manually. But I mean, it's not that much of a difference, and instead I have to remember, because there's no interface or anything like that that I can implement on my controller, right? So I don't know if I have all my methods, or maybe I missed something there in the documentation. It felt really weird. And then they had a few endpoints that I thought was kind of weird as well. Resource slash create and resource ID slash edit. I realized later that they have this function called like .api only that removes those two endpoints, and I kind of go, well, why do we have them? Like I don't understand their purpose, and I have a function to remove them. I was just really weird in my opinion. But let's see here now. So now we're having a look at the middlewares, which was that was kind of nice in a way for actually to be able to at least declare my own middlewares and map them to different routes. I still prefer honestly to God, I still prefer the express way of doing things, and this was also a little bit So I can create a routing system for subdomains, which yes, this is true that this can be sort of useful, but honestly, I don't think there's that many applications that I would build where I actually do subdomain routing at the application level. Like you would usually route a subdomain, like if you go to foo.com, then you have a load balancer, an Nginx instance or something like that points you to one server, and if you go to bar.foo.com, you route to a different service. I baking them together into the same application code feels a little bit iffy, but I mean you can of course do it if you want to keep things much simpler. And yeah, and then you can but this is also like weird. So you have a way to namespace your controllers now. So instead of just having a directory where you can just reference that directory directly as an import, you have to create a special method to give it a name so that the framework knows which directory to go and look in. Why not just require the fucking thing? Like, just require it. So this is the thing I was wondering. No, I am actually exporting. No, this is the thing. Maybe I should have extended like controller or something like that, because I forgot to go and check on the controller documentation when I was doing all this mapping. But as you can see here, like I don't really know what's part of this, so I'm kind of just all right. I'm just reading through the docs here, declaring the different methods. And now let's make a few requests here. Yes, and then I think I try to do a post, and that's something maybe I missed that somewhere, but since it said API only, I would have thought it would have been I don't know if we can do this, because I was kind of annoyed that okay, you return HTML to me when I have declared that this should be an API only endpoint. Maybe I haven't done that yet. Maybe that's a spoiler, but I will, I promise. So like when I'm working with REST, I don't want a response of HTML. It's just weird. Why would you do that to me? Just give me like if it's a JSON request, then I expect JSON back. And here is, yeah, exactly. So this is the thing I was saying. I was a little bit confused about that, and here I finally figured out that all right, yeah, if I just set that to false for the post, put, and delete, like the mutating calls, then I can just kind of get through it. It was nice that they kind of implemented this for you, but at the same time, it was a little bit unclear, like as a beginner, because I am a beginner at this framework, pretty much. So I finally figured out that yeah, it's gonna have to be the exact thing. So that's the thing I did earlier, like the prefixing. So adding a prefix, so you get like, because the default is that it just says /users, and I want it to be /API/version1/users. And as you saw earlier, that's like what I added to the controller. So now I have to make sure that I keep that in mind when I work with the what was I saying? When I'm working with the controller and this routing system, like the cross-site request forgery mapping so that I can make sure that the prefix is actually included. And now we're having a look at databases, I think, right? Yes. So I'm just having a look at, I think we're using SQLite for this one because reasons, really. I thought that was the easiest thing. I mean, I could probably just have downloaded a Docker image of MySQL or Postgres, whichever, and done all that work, but SQLite kind of just runs directly on the file system, which is nice, so it's perfect for just development purposes. So then there's this nice little DSL or like SDK type of thing where you can pretty much just create, like you can access the database directly. You can also use models. They have an ORM, which we will look at after I've been done messing around with this. So the thing that I'm looking for now is just figure out, okay, so how do I create a table? Well, I forgot, I didn't run the migration job yet, which is my fault because, hey, I forget that this is not MongoDB. This is a relational database, and in relational databases, we need to create a table. So that's what we're going to do. That thing there, right there. Come on now. Yes, create a table. Use a schema. I should have probably not used create there because they already gave me a user schema, but hey, that's the way it is. So I have two migrations now, one for like two different, like I have a table for user and then one for user schema. But we survive, we make do. So for those of you who don't know what a migration, like in a relational database, this is a very common practice. Like if you change something about your table and records in a database, you usually do something like this where you create a file with the timestamp of the changes that you want, and then you run the migration. It's kind of, for those of you who know about event sourcing, it's very similar. Like you just save a snapshot of all the differences between the database at one point and the database at another point, and then you run all of those files on the database and you end up with the finished end state. And there we are, finally made it. So now I can connect to my little database instance here, and then I wanted to check out status. As you can see there, I have multiple tables, and you can do rollbacks and things of this nature, which is nice. Like it has full support for like all type of migration jobs and stuff like this, and that is pretty nice. It's just that hassle of having to relearn all of these things again, and like kind of how do they do things in this framework. Luckily for me, this is very similar to, I forget the name now of that old, I used another library that I can't remember now for working with relational databases. But yeah, it doesn't matter. It's very similar. It feels very familiar if you worked with relational databases and migrations. So now it's time to do some storing. And in order to do that, I need to figure out what a request is. How does a request work? Because this is like a small thing, but I'm not convinced that I'm just thinking that if you're creating a framework, it's sort of nice in a way to try to keep things a little bit close and like adjacent to already established pattern. And this is just my opinion, but I think that this framework Adonis could have had a small win there, just trying to keep things a little bit closer to something like Express, which is more or less the default for most developers who do JavaScript development. So the thing I'm fucking up right now is basically that there is I'm in Express land, and I'm thinking that okay, this request here is I'm gonna get two inputs. I'm gonna get the request, I'm gonna get the response. But if you actually look closer, I'm not gonna do it. That's not the way it works. The way it works is that there's an object, and then you destructure out the request. So now I should see the right thing, which is yes. So, and now I need to figure out, is that how you save things? Well, you could probably do it that way, but then I realized that shit, I forgot that we also have ORM support, and that's what we're going to look at. Well, that's what we're looking at right now. So the user model, well, the models basically. So I can make models, and now I forget that, hey, I actually already have a user model. So I can do this instead. I will just keep that as is for now, and then I will have a look at the user. Something I saw was kind of nice here is that they have this hook, this concept of a hook, such as with passwords. So if I store a password, you can actually see there if, well, you kind of have to pause it because this is going fucking fast. You can see that they hash the password for you, which is very nice. It's just a small touch that makes my life so much easier. And yeah, so now I remember that the best way to look at this is to actually, I don't remember the fields. That's basically my problem right now. So I'm looking at, okay, yeah, it's the username, it's an email, it's a password, and they are required. So I can just check what properties that I should pick off the incoming request data. And that's, as you can see, like request.post is just the way that you extract out the body. They had like all of these kind of like another weird one, which was like .all or something, if I remember correctly, which merges all the properties from the query, the parameter, and from the body into one big payload. Don't know really why. And yeah, there we are. Saved some data. And the password there, as you saw, was very nicely encrypted. And I didn't have to do anything special. That was very nice. So now I had some issues, if I remember correctly, with working with curl here. I wasn't really sure what was going on there. I might have just made some fuck up, most likely some fuck up somewhere. And so I went over to Postman, because at least here I get an easier time reading the HTML response. I will never forget them for giving me an HTML response on a API endpoint. But then again, it can just be that I don't know how to configure that. So, and here I forgot my colon. Frederick, you sloppy coder, you. Syntax error. Yes, there's a colon. Look at the X. Thank you. Good. True. Alright. So now I could actually save the thing. And now I'm going to await it. And then I'm going to return the user so that we're all resty. Yes. No, Frederick, you forgot the username. Go and fix the username. Stop looking at CSS. Yes. There we are. Good boy. And then I get a password back in plain, like a password back over the network. Just like a real pro. I'm sending passwords over the network and emails and all other kinds of nice personal data. So here we are, getting to the end of my little CRUD application here, figuring out this was a nice and very big time saver. So now I'm basically just trying to figure out where I can find I think it was it the, yes, exactly, hidden. That was a nice feature as well. So I can declare on my model what lines what I want to be hidden. So I can say password, and then I know that my returning model won't actually show that there's a password, like, because I don't want the password to ever go outside of my database or like outside of my running application code. So I'm trying to do a find now. So I found this find by on the user model, so I can actually find the user that I want to have here. So I'm saying .id. At least this was kind of close to Express, which was nice for me, as the old fart I am. I'm set in my ways. User find by ID. Yes. Query. Nice. I'm still sending the email there though. That's not great. But hey, that's the way it is. The thing is though, like I like sort of that it's kind of convenient for me to just add things to a model like this, but at the same time I kind of just want to create my own dedicated objects where I pluck out the data I want for the view, instead of having like a special model that I call a model and like all of this stuff, because usually what I just want to return is a view representation of my model. I don't just want to send the model back. So I'm creating a little helper function here that just checks if the first value is undefined, then just check that these values are not equal, so that I know if I should update this property or not, pretty much. and with anything that is even remotely complicated or not, writing a database query or a model, I need to double check it or triple check it and then fuck it up a few times before I actually get it right, because that's just the way I roll. Password, yes, and this, as you may have noticed, like what I realized here is that if I do this, that's really stupid, because that logic there would create the wrong password. Because if we shouldn't make an update, then I'm gonna use the already hashed password, I think, because I'm not sure if it deserializes. No, I don't know. It doesn't. It doesn't unhash it. So that would have basically made it so that if a user ever updates their account, the next time their password is going to be incorrect, because the password is going to be a hash of the previous hash instead of the password. Luckily, I was clever enough at that specific moment, had a good day, to figure out that that's not something I should be doing. So now we're going to do some updates. Still had that same damn problem. And so I needed to create a new tab there because I completely messed up my Postman interface. I couldn't find the stuff I was looking for. Let's see what was wrong this time. So yes, the cross-site request forgery token. Yes, because you haven't added this. Yes, exactly. /ID. You forgot the /ID. Alright, so that should now pretty much give us all. We still need to do the destroy. Await. Yes, good boy, because you forgot to await. Here we are. Yes, congratulations. You figured out that asynchronous code needs an await in an async function. But overall, this update seems to be working. And now the last thing, how do we delete something? So we have tons and tons and tons of different queries that we can make and stuff like that. So we can use the models directly for convenience, like an ORM thing, or we can just query directly, which is very nice to have that flexibility to do both. And I should have guessed, if it's user.say, there should be one that says user.delete, and that is exactly the way it works. User.delete, return user, and yeah, I think that's pretty much it right there. So now I can delete. I click once, it works. Click twice, it fails, because hey, now there's no more user that you can delete. And I think that's it, really. Yeah, that's pretty much it. So what I want you to take away from this is that Adonis.js, just some thoughts on it. So it's all like, it's very clearly designed for JavaScript development, and it was very convenient. Like, I could kind of figure out all the things very quickly, and it's fun. It's kind of nice in a way as well to have a framework that is like relational database oriented in this fashion. And the war, I would say it's a mixed bag for me. Like, it has most of the things that I would expect from a very, very standard application development framework or standard web framework. It does do a few weird things, as I said, like you use strings to find things, and then you have these like builder patterns that you need to use in order to actually configure everything. So like, I'm not sold on the whole convention over configuration type of thing, because I think that configurations with defaults are better, because like just having conventions just means that, oh, now you just need to read even more documentation, and you can't, yeah, and you lose the flexibility of doing whatever you want. It's still pretty much the same amount of work. So I would say that overall, I think it's nice. I don't think I'm going to switch from Express anytime soon, because this framework is way too opinionated for me. It has way too there's too much fluff around it, and there's too many decisions that have been taken on my behalf that I don't really want to be taken on my behalf. But if I were to really, if I found this to be an interesting thing, and I didn't have tons of experience working with other solutions already, I would have given this a shot for, as I said, standard CRUD application development. I'm not convinced that this is the right way to go for like a for large scale systems or things of this nature. But I think that this is, I mean, it's a mature enough framework that you can use it for serious projects. I'm not going to deny that at all. It seems to be mature enough. It's just, I don't know. I prefer to have choice, flexibility, and understandably, this reduces flexibility in favor of convenience, because that's pretty much what Adonis is about. It's about convenience, developer convenience, and they definitely deliver on developer convenience. If you learn this, it's going to be fairly quote unquote convenient for you to build standard CRUD applications and so forth. It's just that if you ever get into that situation where you want to do something really weird or custom or something like that, and Adonis doesn't really play nice with that. Just as an example, if you want to use MongoDB for this, you're kind of screwed. But yeah, so what I'm saying is that for someone who's looking for a convenient framework to work with, it seems to be a very good fit. But me personally, I still think I'm going to stick with Express. That's how I feel about it. Have a great day.